Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick here with Jake Luke of Baltimore Beatdown and the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. You call this something else now, right? The Exit 52 podcast?
Yes, sir. We have since moved platforms over there. So yeah, that's right. Exit 52.
All right. Outstanding. Jake, happy to have you and talk about a happy day against offense against the Bengals. And I thought we'd first start with just the state of Baltimore sports right now.
I mean, it feels like we've reached a little bit of a zenith here. I think I remarked that both teams ascended into the stratosphere at the same time on this past Sunday. It was quite a time there with the Ravens getting what I would call I don't know if I'd call it a massive win, but it felt like a pretty big one. It felt like they kind of got a monkey off their back there with all that Joe Burrow has done to them in recent years, albeit maybe not at full strength at times, but I felt like they went in there, they made a statement. And then, of course, as that's going on, you have the Orioles choking up on the bat and sending one down the line there to force extra innings against the Rays and clinch the playoffs in a beer-soaked celebration that I think will be rewatched for years to come. So it's a good time, to your point.
That was extremely eloquent, much better than I could do on the topic. I do think this was one of the double highs that we've ever seen in Baltimore sports. And I can never get people to follow a specific definition. And by the way, don't try to trap people on Twitter is like trying to herd cats into a specific definitional thought exercise. They'll refuse to do it, and then they'll say you're an idiot. Any of the Super Bowls is bigger than this. But I ask people to, is there a instance you can think of where the second biggest win for the Baltimore sports team in a day was better than this, than it was on Sunday? And it's the second biggest win. I don't even know if it was the Orioles or the Ravens. I mean, they were both great wins. But I will tell you this: there aren't many second greatest wins that are anywhere close to whichever one it was.
Yeah, really. And it's interesting because how often have they been good at the same time? Maybe a handful of times. And it's certainly in my lifetime. And I do think back to the last time this happened. I think it was 2016. And the Orioles clinched on game 162. I forget who they were playing. And that was when the Ravens played host to the Raiders that season. And Derek Carr and Michael Crabtree, I think, hooked up for like 3 touchdowns in the second half. And the Orioles got it done. The Ravens suffered a pretty crushing loss at home. So I was thinking back on it. I was like, I'm pretty sure like we've never really had them kind of peaking at the same time like this in the same way. And certainly it's only a week 2 game, but it felt like kind of a big deal to my point earlier.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, there's you could probably go back to September of 1996. Maybe the Orioles won on September 1st. That was a season where but could the September 1st win for the Orioles have been as big as either of these wins? If you go back into the 70s, maybe there's a World Series game the Orioles won on the same day the Colts won a game, but I doubt the Colts win was as important as either of these wins was. So I want people to soak in the moment with me, in a sense. And it sounds from the way you're talking about it that you completely do, but I don't get the sense everybody is in the same way. And I kind of want to scream at people that this doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, that was the point that I made on the recap podcast where and listen, I might have had a few drinks throughout that day and I might have been feeling a little emotional, but I was like, you know what, you got to appreciate these moments when they come. Yeah, it's only a week 2 game, and yeah, it's only a playoffs clinch. They haven't gotten it done for the division yet, and certainly there's a lot more to go once they do get to the playoffs. But you just got to appreciate these moments as they come along, because if all you're doing this for is kind of that results base, got to win a championship, got to do that, then that's not a very fun existence as a sports fan, I don't think.
That's a great point. How much is enough as a sports fan? I tell you, as a season ticket holder, what I want is a competitive team every year that has a chance to make the playoffs and a chance to do well in the playoffs to a certain extent. I don't expect them to always have the dominating quarterback or the dominating whatever it takes at the time to go all the way. But I just want a lottery ticket into the thing. And I don't want my franchise tanking or, riding the cycle to try and peak at a higher level than other teams in the years where they can do that. I hate that as a fan. I don't know where you are on it.
Yeah, no, it feels like society is increasing, and maybe I'm getting a little too meta here, but it feels like society is just increasingly becoming all or nothing. It's the haves and the have-nots. It's the hedge funds. It's this and that. And it just feels like authenticity is being stripped away in a lot of different ways. And to see the Orioles, and I know it's interesting, they kind of did this a little bit with tearing things down and going that analytical route and rebuilding that way. And the Ravens have dabbled in that a little bit, but it does feel like we're still dealing with two two organizations that are kind of operating in that way that you're talking about, that feels authentic, that feels kind of true to the roots of kind of a smaller sort of blue collar town, at least as far as pro sports, the pro sports scene goes. So
yeah, consistent competitiveness. Anyway, that's what I'm for. I appreciate it, Luke. Always appreciate hearing somebody else who has a good viewpoint on this. I love the viewpoints that agree with me, but I'm with Voss on a Friday morning GM show, and you probably know about this now. And Voss and I are a little bit different on this. He wants to ride the peak, and he's okay with dealing with the trough as it happens. It's also nice to have that conversation when I have it.
Yeah, no, he's a good friend of mine. I've heard it a time or two over the years. Trust me.
Yeah. This is a game I'm not sure it was as close as the score indicated, largely because of that punt return off the picked up flag.
I agree with you, but I also kind of think about the fact that Geno Stone interception, that's about a 14-point swing when you really think about it, because when they did get down into the red zone, they did a decent job. I think they got stopped once, but other than that, you had the Stone interception there. That's a 14-point swing there. So I'm with you as far as the punt return, but I do think a little bit of the momentum definitely shifted in Baltimore's direction. I'm not sure if you're a big momentum guy. I know that's another divisive topic with sports media these days, but yeah, it's an interesting one to think about in that respect. But I do think the Stone interception was definitely a tide turner as well.
Yeah. Sure, I believe in momentum to a certain degree. I also believe that the balance of strategies usually favors the trailing team in football. And we really saw that here is that, the Ravens had to take multiple attempts to take negative expected point plays in order to get the game over with. And that's what I basically mean by that is expected points aren't a very good measure in the second half of NFL games. You really need expected wins on plays. And the Ravens' ability to have those 6 plays when they finally got the ball again and run out the game, despite the fact that Bengals knew exactly what was coming, was really great. That to be able to see Monken, engineer that the way I'm sure Roman would have, because that was what Roman was really good at. It was great to see Monken do that.
Yeah, and maybe expected chain moving or expected time off the clock, something like that could be adjusted for the second half, because I do think you're onto something there. And it reminded me, and different coordinator, different offense and everything, but it reminded me of the second half of the game in Pittsburgh last year, where they're down to their third quarterback. The Steelers know exactly what they were going to do, and they just continued pressing and pressing and pressing with that running game. And Anthony Brown, God help him, he did all he could, and he got them out of there with a W.
Yeah, really similar final play there too, with Gus Edwards running for 6 yards on 3rd and 4 or something. And the Ravens weren't going to pass the ball, and with Anthony Brown there, it was a good choice as it turned out, and outstanding play. Some more bad news today. Unfortunately, some bad news on Sunday with the injuries to Oweh and OBJ, which has there been additional news? I've been kind of buried in my work here today, and I have not heard anything additional about either of those two in terms of the likely duration of either injury.
I have not heard a peep on Oweh. I am not sure what's going on there. It's interesting. They were both described as not serious. I think Beckham even more so was described as not a serious injury, but it's funny. We were just recording with Jack Settleman, who hosts a podcast with Marlon Humphrey, and he, our podcast is out right now. You can go listen to it. Jack says that they were supposed to have Marlon on this week, that podcast, but he was injured, and so he couldn't appear with them. So I don't know.
Oh, that's the rule they have, that he's not allowed to appear on a podcast when injured.
Okay, so I don't know, like, if that speaks to the extent of it at all. Like, he's still within the injury protocol. I guess that would kind of dictate that. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I've got as far as Beckham goes. Hopefully it is, like John says, not super serious, but we know how he's been with injury updates over the years. Maybe a little shaky in that regard. So, yeah,
he's very secretive. And you know what he ought to do? And, there's a good chance that Harbaugh will hear about this at some point, is the interesting thing. But what Harbaugh ought to do is pick one player and just say, guys, you probably have heard about Kevin Zeitler, but I'm not going to say anything about his injury status for the next game against the Colts here. We're playing that close to the vest and whatnot, even though there's no injury involved. Because if your only comment is no comment, it's got to be no comment about every player. And he's unfortunately, his problem is that I say, no, nothing serious for the players where it is nothing serious or there's no reason, but he's also nothing serious about players where it's a thing. See, if he wants to misdirect, he needs to throw a fake injury out there every once in a while too. I don't know if he's willing to play that game or or not, or if it would really do any good. But the other bad news that happened today, of course, Ardarius Washington going to IR.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I think he's a guy who reminds me a little bit of Geno Stone, of maybe that homegrown kind of diamond in the rough player on the back end. And he had played well to start the season, played well in the preseason. And it's just unfortunate that a guy like that, who presumably was about to maybe take off in a manner similar to Geno Stone. He looked good in that nickel spot. He was strong at times, struggled a little bit against T. Higgins, which is certainly going to happen with that size mismatch. But yeah, that's too bad to see.
Yeah, it really is. Ardarius Washington, to me, was the revelation of camp. Basically the fourth choice at slot corner, and won the job so convincingly in the preseason that I thought, that was, you had all this bad news going on with injuries, particularly in week one, but you had this great thing coming out of camp that you had a healthy offensive line, and boy, that turned around in a hurry. And you had Ardarius Washington, who emerged as the obvious starting slot corner when you tried a bunch of guys there and couldn't. Stevens had to be moved for demand purposes to outside corner, and that Mollett got hurt and Pepe got hurt. So that's quite a, you turn to your last choice and then he ends up being your first choice after all, kind of thing.
Yeah, but it is, to be fair, a time of year to experiment, and especially when you start off 2-0, when it could have been very reasonable that you would start off 1-1 with a tough divisional game on the road. You've given yourself some breathing room to experimenting. You've got a team coming to town who's you're going to be expected to take care of business against. Let's just call it like it is. So
yeah, I agree, and I hope that that's a reasonable assumption given everything that's wrong with the Ravens right now. Mustafa added to the 53 today. The Ravens don't have a landing strip right now. They've got 6 guys, and what I mean by that is they've got 6 guys on the roster who are hurt. Probably all 6 will not play this week. That would be my guess. Now, we haven't had a practice yet, but Owe and OBJ, my guess is if one of them plays, I think it would be above my over-under on the number. I'd probably have an over-under of a half. I don't know how I'd have the lay going on that.
Yeah, they kind of played it safe with week one, didn't they? Where they probably could have played Andrews. We had heard that he did actually have a setback on the Friday going into that game, but I do think they played it safe a little bit. I would probably expect the same thing here, to your point. And yeah, like I said, it's just, if you can't get it done against either Anthony Richardson or Gardner Minshew at home, even with a little bit of a B squad like we're hinting at here, then you've probably got bigger problems to worry about anyway.
Fair enough. Yeah. And just to go do a little roster math with me. So they got 53 spots on the roster. They have 2 practice squad elevations. That's 55. You need 48 to field your 8th offensive lineman. You get a 49th activation for your QB3, which the Ravens have 3 QBs on the roster, so might as well take that. And that means they have to have 6 deactivations. Well, their 6 inactivations are already decided for them without any additional IR moves. Assuming those 6 guys all can't play. It's not an ideal situation. It is far from an ideal situation.
Yeah, no doubt. But I mean, this coaching staff, they've shown an ability to weather storms in the past. They have shown an ability to do that through these first 2 games. I mean, you got to be impressed with the job that Dallas Andrews has done with this offensive line, to your point, with Mustafa, with McCary there at the left side. I mean, Patrick McCary at left tackle, John Simpson, a cast off from Nowheresville with the Raiders last year. You've got Sam Mustafa, just another guy that was just bouncing around the league a little bit, starting at center, and they're getting really quality play out of them. That's super impressive. And then everything going on the back end, getting quality play out of those guys too. I think they're built for it very, pretty well. And you've got reinforcements coming with Humphrey, with Bowser, eventually with Williams. We learned today not going to be heading to the IR. I'm sure you had that on the list as well. Good news on that front, certainly. So, like I said, it's a good time to have to deal with this kind of thing, but you're right. It is far from ideal. And how often have we been there with the Ravens in the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. They already have a roster that is packed with talent ready to return. So they have Bowser sitting there. They have Pepe sitting there, and they have Keaton Mitchell and Malik Ham sitting there. So it's a pretty significant amount of talent they have ready to go. In fact, Keaton Mitchell, if he were ready today, he'd be on the roster. It wouldn't be Gordon. That's pretty clear. Malik Ham, if he were ready today, they'd be sticking him in an outside linebacker right away for a not insignificant number of snaps, I would think, in this next game. So we'll see how this plays out. I certainly hope that the Ravens can make good use of their IR returns this year. Normally I'd say you never really threaten that number of 8 that you can have in a season, but the Ravens actually might do it this year. They might threaten bringing back 8 guys, but does not usually happen that people get injured early enough and unseriously enough that they can actually return at some point during the season, count against one of your 8. And the Ravens actually started with a couple of guys that they moved there before the season even began that were just minor injuries in the preseason.
If anyone's going to be setting new precedents as far as injuries go, it's this franchise, let me tell you.
They do it right, don't they, as far as managing that roster on the margin. And that's, when you get right down to it, that's the beauty of how they were able to assemble the depth necessary to weather this storm in Cincinnati and possibly this coming week against Indianapolis as well.
Absolutely. It's something that, and to your point with the people like Voss, they're kind of, they get frustrated with the fascination with the depth and the back end of the roster, but that's kind of what helps you weather storms like this when you get into these situations. And, they've got an eye for late gems in the draft and diamond in the rough type undrafted free agents. And those at times they can be the make or break players that help you maybe prove the difference between a win or a loss when you're really going through it like this.
Mm-hmm. All right, outstanding. They were badly outsnapped by the Texans in week 1, but they outsnapped the Bengals 70-57. A lot of really nice efficiency in terms of series success rate. Now, series success rate is the number of times, the denominator is the number of times you have a first down, and the numerator is how many times of those you get either another first down or a touchdown. So it's how many times did you not fail to get a first down, if you want to think of it. They only had 5 failures after all game, and they had 26 successes. So 26 out of 31, 84% is outstanding for series success rate. Even for a single game, it's a number rarely achieved. By frame of reference, the 2019 Ravens had about a 79% success rate for the year, and a lot of that was due to fourth down success. So they were maybe at something like 75, 76% without their fourth down success actually jacking that up. And that fourth down success comes at a risk, of course, because if you lose the ball, you lose some significant field position from that.
No doubt. You talk about one shot play in this game, and obviously they hit on it, and that's great. Mm-hmm. But it seemed like it was impressed upon this offense that, hey, we're going to go out there and we're going to sustain drives, and we're going to keep their offense, who has given us problems in the past couple of years, off of the field. And right out of the gate, what happens? 8-minute drive, march it right down their throat. Odell Beckham here, Gus Edwards there, Lamar Jackson scrambling here, Mark Andrews there. And it just, it just felt like that was the focus. And you saw it right out of that first drive. And it was great that they had success on it, because I think it set a tone through the rest of the game, and it really settled Jackson in. He looked, I think, as calm in the pocket, but also he had enough of kind of a quick twitch with his eyes, and he had enough of a sensibility of, okay, I'm going to step out here, step up, run for this first down, and I'm just going to get down. And it felt like he was just kind of really in control in a way that we haven't seen in a long time, which was nice.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. He did scramble some, and some of those would have been the extended plays he would have maybe had normally that would have extended for 3 or 4 seconds. But his average time to throw is 2:59, which is extremely low for a quarterback like Lamar. Lamar is usually right around 3 seconds, even for a full season. He's, his number last year might have been 298 or it might have been 301. I really don't know, but it's right around 3 seconds. Whereas Burrow was 228 in this game. He was very much trying to get the ball out before any kind of rush could develop. But a very fast-paced set of reads for Lamar. And to hear I don't remember who the quote came from, but it was a player who said that Lamar Jackson's reads were some of the fastest he's ever seen. I would really love for that to be true. I'm not sure I completely believe it, but I would really love for it to be true. Faster reads are one of the way Lamar is going to graduate to being the next level of quarterback. Most of the game that he's still got to do is not physical, it's mental, in terms of trying to process things more quickly in the huddle, in terms of getting to the line of scrimmage, process things more quickly at the line of scrimmage so he can make checks. It's that field general type stuff that is what's left for Lamar to learn. In terms of being a quarterback, I think he's got all the other tools necessary.
Yeah, and I think part of it, too, is seeing and taking the check down a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And maybe I think that could be a function of the offense, too, developing around him, because I'm not sure it was all the way there with Roman at times. But, Justice Hill in a Texas route, I see that. I'm just going to take it. I'm going to take what they give me. I feel like what he tries to do sometimes, and it makes perfect sense for a guy with his abilities, is allow the play to develop around him a little bit. When it breaks down, I'm going to step up. I'm going to step right. I've got space in front of me. I'm going to go and run for it. And like I said, I'm totally fine with that, but it would also be nice to see a little bit more of just check it down right, check it down left, let the athlete take care of that for me. And maybe now that they've paid him, they're going to start to emphasize that a little bit more.
Yeah. Uh, nice 37 to 33 pass, run to pass level. And that, there's a chicken egg relationship there. They had the lead most of the game. It's nice to see them be able to maintain that, still try and run out the game. They had a similar kind of a relationship between run and pass in the game against the Texans. They just didn't get it done in terms of running the game out on their last 3 drives. They did a lousy job, but in this game, they did a wonderful job of it. They got 2 first downs when they absolutely needed to have it. And it was a fine day, but it'd be hard for me to find anyone who could compellingly complain about the ratio of, say, run and pass that's occurred for the first couple of weeks for the Ravens.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. It felt like at times during the Roman era, there would be imbalances in that regard, and it felt like the passing game was a little bit lacking, and that's just a bad combination in general. And it felt like good balance through the first couple of weeks. And to your point, the execution, I think, was better this week. Funny enough, in a hostile environment, much louder, much more difficult, I would think. But it seemed like everyone was rowing in the same direction in that regard. And it was really interesting to see. And it also felt like the passing game was a little bit of an extension of that running game where, and I emphasized this in the preview show that we did, just take what they give you. Don't try to overcomplicate it. It's going to be a hostile environment and the stakes are going to be high. So just settle in and let's see if we can just move the ball down here a clip at a time and not go too crazy. And that's kind of exactly what they did. When it was over the middle, they just took it over the middle and they allowed the clock to continue to run. And I think Anarumo wanted him to throw the ball to the point that a lot of people were making. And there are more all 22 savvy people that could confirm or deny that. But it felt like Anarumo was saying, hey, here it is. If you want to throw against us, go for it. And Lamar Jackson said, thank you, sir. I think I'll do that. And it worked out pretty well for them.
Yeah, definitely. Even when they were spying him, they weren't really able to keep up with him. And the amount of pocket sidestepping that Lamar did this was at the highest level I've ever seen him do. I mean, he's had games where he's been able to back up and create a play sometimes that just boggles the mind. But he's had I'm thinking 2019, the touchdown to Boykin in the very first game against Miami was one of these back up, throw it into the end zone, actually recognize the 2 Miami defensive backs, one of which was Minka, had his back turned to him and be able to throw it up so Boykin is the only one who can react in time to run to the ball. Just a remarkable throw. But in this game, he was roaming the pocket and, it was like a maze to him and he's still moving around in it fairly easily.
Yeah, no, it felt like, and a lot of it was, I'm going to remain throw ready through a lot of this stuff, whether there's chaos going on around me, there's guys falling down, there's this and that. I'm just going to step up. I'm going to step to the right. I'm going to shade a little bit to the left. I'm going to remain throw ready. But hey, when it's time to go, my clock is going to tell me and I go. And there were a few crucial scrambles there. A lot of people pointing out not many design runs for him thus far through the season, but I mean, his legs were a big, big asset in this game. And I think a big part of that is because he threw it so effectively that the Bengals eventually kind of had to respect that. And once you start to respect that, guess what? You're leaving something else open, and that is his legs, and he's going to make use of them. And he did.
Yeah, he left a really big run on the field too, with the 19-yard run that was called back on the Mustafa hold. Would have those 2 holding penalties on back-to-back plays against DJ Reader stalled a drive, and it was one of the only times the Ravens failed in the red zone. It was the only time. They made 4 trips to the red zone. They scored 24 points, which, by the way, is outstanding. Anytime you can score 6 points per drive, I think anybody can realize that would be outstanding, but I do want to provide a framework for this. In 2 games, they've now had 49 points on 9 red zone trips. That's 5.4 per trip. Kansas City led the entire NFL last year at 4.2 points per red zone trip. So the Ravens are off to a fantastic start in that regard. And they were 8th at 3.5, despite a terrible finish last year. And a lot of that was just a complete failure to finish in the red zone with Huntley at quarterback late in the season.
Yeah, I felt like the drives were sustained there with Roman. You got to give him that credit, certainly, but there was just a complete lack of finishing. And I think there was a lack of finishing on the other side of the ball, too, where it's like you're missing that interception by this close. You're missing that sack by this close. Certainly, we saw that with one particular player. But yeah, on the offensive side of the ball, that was a big complaint, along with a lot of the procedural stuff as far as getting to the line in time and getting lined up correctly. And we really haven't seen too much of that at all through these first 2 games. And it's a welcome breath of fresh air.
You're talking about the couple drops by Patrick Queen in terms of the interceptions last year?
No, I'm talking about OA not finishing sacks.
Oh, okay. Because a couple drops by Patrick Queen were right in the red zone too. All right, let's talk about Lamar a little bit, and we'll move on and hopefully get to as much of this as we can. Uh, the Bengals did not do what I would call their normal thing. They have been much more of a four-man rush team against the Ravens over the years, and it hasn't really mattered whether it was Flacco or Jackson. They've still tried to stay with four most of the time, but they rushed 5+ on 12 occasions, 36%. It's a lot for them, I would say. What I've always talked about in previous seasons is that they are expert at rushing that linebacker just as Jackson is breaking the pocket. Now, the rule is, of course, the spy or the inside linebacker in zone on the side where the roll occurs rushes the quarterback immediately as soon as the pocket is broken. That's kind of a universal defensive rule. But JOK in particular, and the Browns, the combination of Wilson and Davis Gaither, also even Pratt to a lesser extent, that's really Davis Gaither and Wilson, rush Lamar and have given him fits over the years by anticipating the pocket breaking before it really does and getting there. But in this game, honestly, the Bengals, they did a little bit better when they rushed 5 against Lamar. I'm going to go through those numbers in a moment, but it's surprising, and there's certainly committed resources to getting it done in this game that we really haven't seen in past years.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it's one of those things where you just kind of wonder, how are you going to be able to contain a guy like that as a defensive coordinator? It certainly would keep me up at night. And I think like the QB spy, it can be a blessing and a curse, because to your point, there's a technique for it. There's like, okay, I break it this time or that time. I feel like Lamar is a guy who
he knows it. Yep.
Yeah, he knows it, and he's so freaking fast, and he can cut so quickly, and he's so quick, and it's got to be hell as a linebacker to have to deal with that. But to your point, I mean, they have had the guys like Wilson, especially in the last couple of matchups, I feel like has been kind of a hair on fire type guy that's been tough to deal with, but certainly not this past game. And I think, to what we talked about, maybe it has something to do with the efficiency in the passing game to start things out.
Yeah, I think that's a fair connection to make. I want to talk about ample time and space, ball out quick, and pressure. And for folks who are new to the show, or maybe have heard me use the terms but don't know them yet, ATS, ample time and space, effectively means the quarterback has a 3-second pocket, or would have had a 3-second pocket, even if he releases the ball early, because that will sometimes happen. BOQ is ball out quick, meaning pressure might have developed within 3 seconds. I err on the side of pressure developing if I'm not sure, but the ball is released in less than 3 seconds. And then a pressure event is some sort of pressure event occurring before 3 seconds occur, but not after. So you can have an ATS opportunity that becomes a sack if Lamar holds the ball for 5 seconds and then gets taken down at the end of that. But anyway, to go through the opportunities in this game, 13 ATS opportunities. And by the way, that's a lot, 39%. He completed 10 out of 13 on those for 147 net yards, 11.3 yards per play. Jackson had a very good game, and he had some good. He was very good last week as well, throwing not under pressure in this game. But 11.3, it's you want your quarterback to be around 9 or 10 in a typical game, but 11.3 obviously outstanding. It did include that 52-yard throw to Flowers.
Yeah. No.
As a bettor, you demand perfection, and MyBookie delivers. NFL, college football, and a brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. If the first 2 legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and use those funds for another bet, or let it all ride for a chance at an even bigger payday. Join the MyBookie family for an entire season filled with odds boosts, free bets, and super contests. This season, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on a deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly to your MyBookie account. Bet your deposit amount once, and you're ready to cash out at any time. Again, that's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash deposit bonus. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie. With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you with fast, chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. If you're too busy this fall to cook but want to make sure you're eating well, then get Factor. This is what I did. We were moving, packed up all my dishes, everything needed better meals. I signed up for Factor. It's best meals, probably the healthiest I've eaten in a month thanks to these Factor meals. Because with Factor, you can skip those extra trips to the grocery store and the chopping, the prepping, the cleanup, all while still getting flavor and the nutritional quality you need. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes. So all you have to do is heat, enjoy, and then get back to crushing your goals, which for me was trying to move. But now I can't. I need them for work at lunch every day. They're perfect. So this September, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavor-packed meals delivered to your door. Ready in just 2 minutes. No prep, no mess. So head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use that code Ravens50 like I did to get 50% off. That's Ravens50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off your Factor meals.
No, I think, and he spread the ball around pretty well too, as far as the target share went, which was nice to see. I don't know if he wound up having one to Duvernay ultimately. I know he got the one called back, but got pretty much all the receivers involved other than him, whether it was Aguilar, whether it was Beckham early on, who I thought looked really good before the injury. Bateman getting involved a little bit, and then obviously Flowers, but not only them, you got Mark Andrews getting back in the mix, probably not even fully healthy and looking really good still. So yeah, he pushed the ball pretty well, but they didn't overdo it. I mean, the one shot play, it worked out well, and you kind of just take that and say, all right, that's good enough. And the rest of the game, it was just a lot of intermediate stuff, and it all worked really well in their favor.
Yeah. By the way, I think it's a great point. And even the fact that they got 3 targets to Duvernay but didn't get him a catch, I'm not too concerned about. What I like about the fact that the ball is getting spread out much better than it has in past years is that it actually forces the defense and further advanced scouts to look at that tape and decide that, hey, we really do have to defend this receivers. We have to make difficult choices about who we're going to cover and decide how we're going to roll our safety help, et cetera, et cetera. It gives them more dilemmas to worry about that are not easily solvable. So I really like that. And I think if you're going to act as if you're going to say that you want to make the defense defend every blade of grass, then you really have to be willing to throw the ball to pretty much every eligible receiver.
Yeah, I think it's an important thing. And for confidence too. I mean, you're talking about some young guys still, especially there with Flowers, and then Duvernay, he's starting to come into his own, but Bateman, talk about confidence issues. I mean, the guy was not in a good headspace for very valid reasons coming into the season. So spreading the ball around, getting them involved, it's just a little bit of a mental boost for a receiving core that outside of Beckham, still pretty young.
Yeah, very true. Okay, I go through these stats really quickly. 12 ball out quicks, 36%. He was 9 of 12 for 49 yards, 4.1 yards per play. That's not particularly good. You'd expect a little bit better because you're truncating out of the sacks when you have the ball out quickly. 8 pressure events, 24%. What's really nice about that is that's a very low number. Very low number. And I know some other group, Next Gen, had him as 9% pressure rate. I'm not in agreement on that because I'm protective of the cone, so I'm using a little just definitional difference there between the two of us, obviously. I would be interested to know which plays they counted as pressure or whether it was just pressure at the throw, say. And so a flushed Lamar is not a pressured Lamar. That may be a definitional difference they're using. But in any case, he was 5 of 8 on the throws he was pressured for 41 yards. It's 5.1 yards per play. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a really good number when you're under pressure. To have no turnovers, no fumbles, no sacks, no nothing like that occurring, and 5.1 yards per play is excellent.
Yeah, the stats also back up that when he's been clean, he's hit pretty much every big opportunity, which is huge. I mean, last season, how many times did we see him have a clean pocket and just whether he was skittish or whether he didn't trust the receiver, it just totally scattershot on some of these plays. I think of him against the Bengals last year under the lights when he missed Tylan Wallace for what should have been a touchdown, a walk-in touchdown. Mm-hmm. Just a lot of those. So it's nice to see him settling in, and feels like he's trusting his offensive line. He's trusting his receivers. You know, the play calls are good, and everything's just clicking right now.
Yeah, I mean, everything's perfect when you can step into a long throw too. And I got a little bit of myself into a little bit of trouble for talking about the Flowers throw. I'm honestly not crazy about the amount of risk entailed in that throw being thrown into double coverage, but it's hard not to like I mean, you can't not like the result, obviously. But what I would liken it to is a 28.3-point shot in college ball say, where you go, no, 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 great shot, kind of thing. It was that kind of thing to me. You're at a point in the game where you'd love to have a sustained drive, and you already are in pretty good field position from Geno Stone's interception return, although not as great field position as they should have been in, but pretty good field position. We won't beat on Geno anymore over this. But it's just my position. Please, I hope folks will understand there. Some people have been beating on me on Twitter about this. It's not a big deal or anything, but will understand my feeling on the matter.
No, you're being process based, and I totally get that. And, maybe the results don't necessarily excuse that, but maybe it goes back to, and listen, our guy, John Harbaugh, a little bit of an emotional coach. I think he was feeling that wave. And Spencer said it right before the play. I want a shot play. I want them to really kind of rip their heart out here. And I think that probably had to demoralize the Bengals a little bit, where we just give up this massive interception. Essentially, it was
well covered.
Yeah, exactly. It was a 7-point swing at the time. And then all of a sudden they hit this big shot play to Flowers. The emotions are just running high on the Ravens sideline. They're all jacked up. They run down the field there and they score a touchdown, turns into a 14-point swing. You're probably right in that entailed a little bit of risk. What I liked about it, though, was it seemed like Lamar knew exactly what he was doing, and even throwing into double coverage, a lot of people were making the point that, if he puts a little bit more air under that, then Flowers walks in. Well, if he put a little more air under it, then the Bengals defenders probably catch up to it as well. So he put it right on Flowers' helmet. Like, he just ripped a sniper shot in there. And maybe I'm excusing it a little bit. Maybe I'm getting a little swept up in the result too. But I see what you're saying about the process, maybe not being totally perfect. But the fact that it worked to perfection, I think, is it's a thing of beauty, because we were not seeing much of this last year, were we?
No, and it's a beautiful on target throw. And I'll tell you what, nothing will draw more safety attention than a ball stuck in there like that with a very tight left-right bracket. And that's what it was. It wasn't over top safety. It was a safety who's trying to catch up to the play. So the danger was on an underthrow there primarily, or off left or right. I mean, underthrow or off left or right. But in any case, the nothing will draw more safety attention from the next several games for Flowers than that play. So you got a guy who can certifiably go catch the football. You got defensive backs have a very hard time keeping up with him, even though, honestly, the Bengals defensive back on the play, I don't remember who it was, kept up with him pretty well with outside leverage on the play. He gave up the inside leverage to Flowers. I thought, all in all, opposing advanced scouts and defensive coordinators are going to look at this and say, we got to double Flowers, because there's no way we can let him do this play after play. We need to force him to take this shot again, and we'll intercept the ball sometimes when they throw it.
Yeah, and then what do you got behind him? A couple solid possession receivers. You got arguably the best tight end in the league. You've got a solid tight end behind him. You've got the best running quarterback in the league. You've got a solid running game. So the offseason plan seems to be coming to fruition here pretty early on.
Yeah, absolutely loving it. I agree. Who do you think that ball was intended for in the end zone? There's some talk that OBJ might have been the intended receiver. And by the way, that play is a good indication that it's not just within the Roman offense that receivers end up in the same spot. It's a natural effect of extended plays in the National Football League, is that you end up with oftentimes receivers in the same place.
Yeah, I think it was intended for Beckham. And like, that goes into, I'm so glad that you said that, because after week one, people were doing screenshot. Twitter was just having so much fun with, these Ravens receivers were in the same area. It's like, guys, it happens in every single offense. Yeah, it maybe happened a little bit too often in Greg Roman's offense. I'll grant you that. But this screenshotification of social media, and we're going to point out these mistakes here and get all nitpicky. It grinds my gears a little bit. But yeah, I do feel like it was intended for Beckham. Unfortunate that one didn't work out. But it honestly, a little bit of a yakety sax, funny visual kind of play, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, it is you point out an excellent issue in general. Is people take the visual to be more important, and then they lose the kind of the batting average component of this. Now, what do I mean by this? We don't judge hitters by their longest home runs. And we can see videos of Gunnar Henderson's longest home runs, or whoever it might be, Shohei Ohtani, whatever it might be, their longest home runs. Probably a bad hitter would be better, like Rob Deere, or somebody from recent times, Adam Dunn, who was a big power hitter who also struck out a ton. But you see, people want to have a visual confirmation of their own thought, and then they use it to convince themselves that their narrative from all the time was correct. And that's a general problem with trait-based people who want to lean on trace-based things and use available all 22 to try and show it. It is not a comprehensive way to view what you're trying to do. And that's why I really respect people like Michael Crawford, who looks at the run game and looks at every single play and charts it. And other people like that, PFF's process, you may not agree with every method they use for scoring, but they do look at every player on every play. And they've at least got that to go for. And so they've got a framework built up that is one of the best for looking at offensive linemen, for example, from other teams.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too crazy because some of these people doing these screenshots are the ones that are actually sitting down and watching the tape, which is something that I don't do probably nearly as often as they do. So certainly respect on that front, but let's just maybe calm down a little bit with the reactionary, saw this screenshot, let's put it out there and spread misinformation. That part just kind of irks me a little bit.
Yeah. All right. What else we want to talk about? Let's talk about the running backs a little bit because Gordon up from the practice squad for this game, praise from Harbaugh before the game as he was a guy they would, were very happy with. The running back snap division in 75 snaps was Hill 43, Edwards 32, Gordon 0. So they didn't put him on the field. They did have Devin Duvernay in the backfield lined up twice, which I thought was very interesting. And I guess I would ask the question, do they need Melvin Gordon and the potential for acid reflux it will cause with John Harbaugh? I don't want to lead the witness too much. Were he to fumble the football, as opposed to just using Devin Duvernay in the backfield for 3 to 5 carries per game or 3 to 5 snaps per game.
Yeah, and a touching tribute to Greg Roman there, getting Devin Duvernay involved in the running game. But yeah, this Melvin Gordon thing is just, it's already gone too far in my opinion. And it's funny you say acid reflux for John Harbaugh, because I feel like this is like John gets his guys. He gets his picks of the litter, I think, on some of these back end of the roster players. I feel like he has this fascination with Melvin Gordon. Maybe he was watching him 8 years ago, carving up the Big Ten, when Jim was just starting out at Michigan and said, oh man, that's a dude right there. But Melvin Gordon's had fumbling problems the last couple of years when he's been on the field, when he's been healthy, and that hasn't really been the case. So I don't really understand this fascination with him. I feel like it is a Harbaugh thing, and I feel like we're going to be getting, and it's funny because we actually did get a little bit of hands on his knees, head down John last week, but it feels like this is potential to maybe cause a little bit more of that.
Right. The other thing he got really upset about was the penalties on the defensive line, and he turned his back on the field to chew out Duvernay and Travis Jones together. Not Duvernay, Madubuike and Travis Jones together about their penalties. Then Madubuike had another one in this game. Queen almost had another roughing the passer, but it seems like there are multiple things that can kind of get him going. But you're right. I mean, fumbling, I think, has been one of the things traditionally that has led to benchings from Harbaugh.
Yeah, and it feels like Melvin Gordon, I hate to rag on the guy before he's really had any significant action here, but it feels like he could be heading there. But I mean, talk about the duality of man with Harbaugh. He had that going on, and then you had the end of the game where he's maybe as jacked up as we've ever seen him. He's grabbing Keith Williams by the shoulders and he's throwing Justice Hill around. It was quite a varied performance by him. That
was a very honest revelation of how Harbaugh viewed the importance of this game. I think he knew it was a huge game. They just gone in. I mean, you got the double whammy of dropping Cincy to 0-2 in the division. He didn't know about anything about the injury to Burrow and what was going on, but he knew they'd beaten Burrow, and that was a monkey off their back to a certain degree after the 2 losses at the end of last year. And of course, the Ravens, what it means to them as a franchise to win that game it can't be understated in terms of where they are to start the year in the division. I feel like you need to look for 2 things from Harbaugh to decide if you're getting something that's honest or straightforward in terms of what he's doing. And I don't think John Harbaugh is a dishonest guy. I think he intentionally misleads people on injuries, and he makes extensive use of coach speak in interviews as well. And I don't have a problem with either of those because that's the job description. But what I do have what I latch onto when I hear it, I'll say in interviews, is when he goes out of his way to be specifically effusive about a player. So the best example I have is when he talked about Chuck Clark and taking the green dot over, and he said something like he's bold, brilliant, and brief or something, but he went out of his way to be alliterative about it so that he would make his point. And he clearly really believed it from the nature of that thing. Otherwise, you say Chuck Clark's a veteran of this league. He's more than capable of the green dot. He's probably better than 75% of the. I mean, he could even say that, and it would still be coach speak. But as soon as he gives you something to really latch onto, that's where my ears perk up a little bit to what he's saying.
Yeah, I think it can be canned at times, but I think he wants the players to hear that. I think he wants them to, because he's probably not, when he's in these meetings with all the players, he's probably not going to single guys out too much and, lift a guy up too much and maybe make, teammates or competitors in the same position not feel as good, but he wants them to know that he's got his eye on them. Certainly. I think he's very savvy with the media in that regard, but yeah, man, he's, I was talking about this with Kevin Ostreicher earlier tonight. He's just a guy that, and there are other ways to do this. Bill Belichick certainly is not this way. He just wears his heart on his sleeve a lot of the time there on the sidelines. And whether it's in a big game against, I think it might have been the Bengals playoff game last year where he's getting the sideline interview and he's just not having it. And he doesn't care that the sideline reporter knows that he's not having it. He just wasn't into it. And he was just very, very upfront and honest about the fact that, look, I got a game to coach. I really don't care about this. Let's just move this thing right along. Yeah. And then, you have this past game where it's hands on the knees, head down. I'm sure the cameras know, or the cameras are watching me right now, but I don't care. And then at the end of the game, I don't care that the cameras are watching me celebrate week 2 game like I just won the Super Bowl, because guess what? This is really important to me. This is a team that knocked us out of the playoffs. This is a team that, to the point that Roquan Smith has made, has talked a lot of smack in the last couple of years and does not really show us a lot of respect on a personal level. So guess what? We're happy that we just came in here and returned them the favor a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I could completely agree. It's not dissimilar to some of the past Pittsburgh wins. I don't think we need to even beat this point in the ground, where he talks about how, this series is played between mighty men and things like that. We'll literally go into that kind of talk. Obviously, he really believes in that and the importance of physicality in the game. So, I'm getting a good feeling about this in terms of you're looking for the same cues from what he says, either in the interview or what we see on the sideline from him in terms of just jumping around and doing stuff. But he's a very interesting character, but I don't think he's as complex as people would make to be out of, or he's like a closed door in terms of all information. I ascribe that much more to a Belichick.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think he's an open guy, an honest guy. I think at the end of the day, he's a guy that you would want to play for, certainly. And I'd love to write the book on him one day. We'll see if I ever get that access. I just think that would be really fascinating. But like, you talk to these people that have been around him for years, like a Pete Gilbert, and it's just like, yeah, man, like he'll talk to you at a press conference and he'll say like, hey, that's a stupid question or whatever. But then after that's over, he'll walk up to you and say, hey, let me explain to you why I said that. I'm going to take you into my office. I'm going to show you the film of why we checked it down to Ben Watson on 4th and 16 and why that actually made sense to us in the moment. So he'll wear his emotions on his sleeve. He'll call his BS out as he sees it, but he doesn't do it without any intention or purpose. And he doesn't do it with malice in his heart.
Right. I would agree with that directly. Let's move on here because I have a good story with that, but I won't use it for this time around. I thought on the final drive, one of the things I really liked about the Ravens ran at the clock, and they had 6 run plays, 2 first downs, is they did a lot of mix of concepts. So one of the questions, of course, that's really come up is, can the Ravens run out of 11 personnel? Well, first of all, they didn't have 11 personnel on the field. They had 21 and some 22 on the field during those things. So that was fine. But they did a really good job of mixing up concepts. They had a couple jet sweeps, a couple keepers. They had mesh plays involved. One, at least, where Lamar held onto the ball and moved. And I think they had one design pass where Lamar ended up scrambling as well. But every single one of those 6 plays, in addition, the ball carriers were very savvy about going down in bounds, including Lamar, who was getting dangerously close to that right sideline.
Now, where I'm curious on the splits here, when we talk about 21, does Ricard lining up as a tight end count as that?
Not necessarily. That would technically be a 12, but I would ask for a liberalization of that definition, where if Ricard's in the game, I'm really calling it 21 regardless of where he is. But you're right, it'd be a 12 if he was, or it could be a 13 where he was, because they used an extra offensive lineman as well during that series.
Yeah, certainly. And this is something that obviously I'm not super studied up on, but I just think it's getting them into those situations is a good opportunity to develop a guy like a Likely, who's certainly just more of a pass catcher, into a run blocker. Like, I feel like Mark Andrews has developed into a pretty solid run blocker. He was not that guy at Oklahoma, and they've done a really good job with him. So I'm curious to see if that's going to translate to Likely's game at all.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. He had some really good blocking games last year. Charlie Kolar is a guy who could be a good blocker. He certainly has the size to do it. He's gotten bigger this offseason, which is one of the things that came up in his interview at camp this year, was talking a little bit about that. But I agree with you on that. I'm going to take just a moment, because I like to have one kind of teaching thing, or at least one way to look at it here. There's two different things about formation, and you just asked me about it specifically, so I'm going to get back to it for a second. There's the apparent formation, which is what you show the opposing defensive coordinator and what he needs to react to in terms of his personnel. So you shuttle your players onto the field, they're in the huddle, and you've got, let's say, Ricard, two other tight ends, and a running back and a wide receiver out there among your skill position players. You've shown him an apparent 22 personnel grouping, as I would think about it. And then they might line up differently. You might line up with three tight ends in that set. Your back is split wide and you're empty. I mean, you could do a lot of crazy things in terms of how you set up, but you could, more than likely, you could line up with three guys at the line of scrimmage at tight end, maybe one flex, and in a YY set otherwise, and then have your running back behind you and try and run the football out of that. They did some of that. The other nice thing that they did, and I did not see this coming from Monken at all, they did do it a couple times in week one, but they ran 10 different unbalanced line formations in this game. And that included 5 on the 6 plays on the final drive. So they were really making heavy use of that. They were tucking in Moses to reduce the chance of somebody getting around him on a run play, which I think was very effective, using McCary on the end of those formations. And even they used Zeitler a lot to pull in this game, and they're having Zeitler often pull from the other side to the heavily loaded side of these unbalanced formations. Fa'alele also did a pretty good job in 3 snaps, which we'll get to a little bit later. But I love the use of unbalanced line by Monken down the stretch in this game.
Yeah, I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think that's a function at all of some of the injuries that they were dealing with?
I do think that actually, no. Okay, here's why. I think it was a function of wanting to, more than anything, wanting to tuck Moses on the wherever the strong side was going to be. So I think it was a matter of either. I don't think it would matter whether it was Stanley or McCary on the outside, and I don't think it really had a big impact on what Mustafa's responsibilities were on the play. I think it was a matter of tucking Moses in a place where he's more likely to help you with his big, powerful ability to move people and not get beat to the outside.
Yeah, he certainly had a tone-setting block there on one of the opening drives, and I think they got some good usage out of him, and he's looked really, really solid to start the year so far. I'm certainly no line guru, but it doesn't jump off the screen, which is what's good to see, and it's something that's nice, because I think he's had some consistency issues, or maybe just hasn't totally been the strength guy that they built him as when they brought him in. But other than that, I mean, he's just been a very solid starter there on that right side of the line. Very underrated signing that's really dividends for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the great free agent signings they had in recent years. Last year he had a very good year, and this year the first game was not very good, honestly. But he's playing against Will Anderson, who's the best player the Texans have got, and obviously was giving anybody trouble. And then the second game, he's terrific, and we'll get to it a little bit later. But he was the Ravens' best lineman, and I'll go through that with you in the second part of this show. What else do we need to talk about in this game? How about the switch and the use of Duvernay? So 7 snaps in week 1. And it just felt like they were holding him back to be this new gadget guy against the Bengals again. I don't think it was the injury to Dobbins or anything about that. I don't think that was the reason. But now they all of a sudden they returned him. And week 5 of last year in the game in Baltimore, Duvernay was a huge gadget player for them.
Yeah, and maybe I just see a few Twitter accounts here that do this, and maybe this is just me doing something that our former president used to do with many people are saying, but it seems like there's a lot of talk about just jettisoning Duvernay out of town for like a 4th round pick or something like that. I'm really just not on board with that at all, unless something gets really bad as far as depth goes at a certain position. Maybe you could trade him for a player that would help you in the more immediate, but I just don't understand this rush to move on from Devin Duvernay from some people. I just feel like he's a guy who can still offer you something. He certainly does in the return game still. And then if you have one injury in that wide receiver room, then all of a sudden you're probably going to be relying on him to take some meaningful snaps in games.
Yeah, I think there's that for sure. I agree with everything you just said, but I'd even go a step further that I think Flowers, his best usage is as the deep threat who draws safety help, because there's not really anybody else who reshapes how the defense has to play the Baltimore Ravens and can force the personnel to certain places, other than Jackson himself, who forces zone coverage, forces a spy, forces everybody basically to be focused on the mesh point and the potential for a boot on every play. All that is great. But if you have Devin Duvernay along with Flowers, then Devin Duvernay can run a lot of your gadget plays that you now have going to Flowers. He's not the missed tackle machine that Flowers is, but I kind of like the idea of having Duvernay take some of those smoke screens and be the guy who tries to maneuver through traffic on it, just because there is some injury risk involved. I don't want Flowers taking a bunch of hits this year on little dumpy passes like that, where Keaton Mitchell or Duvernay or Justice Hill could do it.
Yeah, Duvernay came hot out of the gates last season. I think he had several touchdowns for the first month. And, obviously the whole passing attack kind of fell apart to a certain extent, and he was a part of that. But I don't know, man. You could do way, way worse than having that guy as your fifth wide receiver. And I love the depth that he brings. And I love, to your point, the plays that he can still make within this rotation when they want to get him involved.
Yeah. It's been I still really enjoy him as a player, and I hope that they'll continue to throw him the ball. I don't think he lost trust from this game for not catching two balls. One of the balls was kind of a catchable ball. It would have been a little bit difficult. There was a short pass, and I think it was reviewed, or the officials got together and they decided it was an incomplete, but it appeared to be complete right at the start. And then the ball in the end zone would have been an unbelievable catch that he nearly made. So hopefully that's actually a slight plus trust ball from Lamar's perspective. But I'm glad to see the ball is getting schemed to him still a fair amount, and I hope that'll continue, even if there are some bumpy times ahead, because I think he could potentially be a really valuable guy to have the ball in space.
Yeah, and helps in the run game with the jet sweep decoys when they want to move him along, to your point. So, yeah, just a versatile player and hopefully an important cog moving forward.
All right. I agree. I did want to, I'll mention briefly, Ravens are playing a lot lighter this year, 1.48 heavies per play. If you've been following this show, they were at times north of 2.5 last year. They ran absolutely the heaviest schemes maybe any team in NFL history has ever run, in a relative sense, meaning relative to the average of the rest of the league. They're far more tight ends, OL6, and fullbacks last year than anybody had played in many, many years in the NFL. The closest had been the 2019 Vikings with 199, and they were at 236, 2.36 per play, that is. So it's interesting. The 1.48 yesterday, they're obviously, the offense has been Monkenized. There's a lot less Ricard usage. And frankly, there's a lot less tight end usage in this. So we've seen a lot less of Kolar, is Kolar inactive this last game? He was inactive, right?
Yes.
And we've seen a lot less of Likely in terms of total snaps on the field.
Yeah, and that's nice that they're leaning into it right out of the gates, that we're not just going to be this overly reliant on tight ends, one divisional passing attack. We went out, we got, this high-priced wide receiver on the free agent market. We drafted one in the first round for a reason, and we are seeing them get really good usage out of them to start the season.
All right, well, fair enough. Agree with that. Tell you what, we will break, and when we come back for part 2 of the episode, it'll be a separate download, folks. We'll talk about some individual performances, and we'll talk about the offensive line play. But first, Jake, where can people find your work online?
You can find me on Twitter at Jake Luke. That's LOUQUE. And then you can find the Exit 52 podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your shows, talking Orioles, talking Ravens, all that kind of stuff. It's all there. We're doing at least 3 episodes per week throughout the football season, probably more as the Orioles kind of gear up for the playoffs here. So check it out.
All right. Outstanding stuff. I highly recommend it. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. I'm always interested in hearing your ideas, and I want to work with you. If you have an idea for a study, I haven't talked about this in a while, and you want help getting started on how to do an analysis project, for example, but you'd like to figure the answer to a question and you're willing to put in some time on it, love to talk to you about that. Again, DM on Twitter. They're always open, and I'll get right back to you and talk to you about it. We'll probably have a phone call if you want that to discuss it more. And always, of course, interested in analysis or thought experiments or other shows that make good pods. Jake, thanks again for coming on.
Happy to do it, sir. Thanks for having me.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.